Sometimes in life, you reach a point where holding on begins to hurt more than letting go. You hold on to people who drain your energy, to relationships that no longer bring you closer to Allah, to expectations that were never realistic to begin with. You hold on because you fear loss, you fear loneliness, you fear change. But one day, you must stop and ask yourself, is this bringing me closer to Allah, or is it pulling me away? Letting go as an act of tawakkul is one of the most transformative spiritual shifts a believer can make, because it requires you to surrender not to weakness, but to divine wisdom. So often, the things we cling to, people, situations, expectations, are the very things that drain our heart and cloud our clarity. Yet we insist on holding on because we fear what will happen if we release them. We fear loneliness, uncertainty, change, or starting over. But in reality, what we truly fear is losing control. Tawakkul teaches us that control was never ours to begin with. Allah is the one who manages your affairs, protects your heart, and writes every detail of your life with precision and mercy. When you let go for the sake of Allah, you are not moving backward. You are moving into alignment with His plan. Sometimes Allah tests your heart by taking something away so that your trust in Him becomes deeper than your attachment to His creation. This is why letting go is not a passive act. It is an active declaration of faith. It is saying, "Why Allah, I trust your plan more than my desires. I trust your timing more than my impatience. I trust your choices more than what I think is best for me." That kind of trust purifies your heart from dependence on anything fragile and redirects you toward the one who never disappoints. Many times, the things we refuse to release become barriers between us and growth. They distract us from our purpose. They slow down our spiritual progress, and they cloud our ability to hear the whisper of guidance. Letting go clears that space. It gives your heart room to breathe again and allows your soul to return to its natural state, connected to Allah. You begin to realize that no person, no relationship, and no opportunity can bring you what Allah has already destined for you. So why cling to something that was never written to stay? Letting go also brings emotional freedom. You stop forcing what is not meant to work. You stop trying to fix what Allah has closed. You stop chasing people who have already walked out of your life. Instead, your heart starts to rest. You finally understand that what is written for you will come to you, even if the whole world tries to block it. And what is not written will never stay, no matter how tightly you try to hold on. This realization is a source of deep peace, because it shifts your energy from fear to acceptance, from anxiety to calm, and from desperation to dignity. There is also a profound sense of empowerment that comes from trusting Allah over your emotions. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "Allah is guiding me, even if I don't see it yet." You stop thinking of loss as punishment and start viewing it as redirection. Every time you let go, you move closer to becoming the person Allah wants you to be. Stronger, wiser, calmer, and more spiritually anchored. Letting go is not the end of something. It is the beginning of your heart's renewal. When you release, what was never meant to be yours. Allah replaces it with something far better, something that elevates your faith, strengthens your character, and aligns with your destiny. This is the beauty of Tawakkul. When you trust Allah enough to let go, He never leaves your hands empty. People come into our lives with different purposes, different lessons, and different durations. One of the most important realizations you can make is that not everyone is meant to stay forever. Some individuals are written into your story only for a chapter, and when that chapter ends, forcing it to continue only brings pain, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Understanding this truth allows you to see people's presence and their departure with a clearer and more compassionate heart. It helps you shift from attachment to acceptance. When someone leaves your life, it can feel like a personal failure or rejection. You may question your worth, your efforts, or your decisions. But often, the departure of a person has nothing to do with your value. It has everything to do with the role they were meant to play. Some people are placed in your life to teach you patience, others to test your strength, others to awaken your boundaries, and others simply to accompany you for a short phase of your journey. Once their purpose is fulfilled, Allah, in His wisdom, removes them so that your growth can continue in a healthier direction. You begin to understand that the loss of people is not always a loss. It can be one of the greatest protections Allah gives you. He removes those who would harm your faith, delay your growth, or distract your heart from its purpose. You may not see the wisdom in the moment, but looking back months or years later, you often realize that losing certain people was actually the beginning of your healing. What felt like heartbreak was, in truth, correction. What felt like abandonment was divine redirection. And what felt like emptiness was space being prepared for something better. Accepting that people are temporary also helps you strengthen your relationship with Allah. You stop expecting permanent comfort from temporary creations. You stop depending on people to give you peace, validation, or happiness, because only Allah can provide those in a lasting and stable way. When you stop expecting the world to fill your heart, you discover the tranquility that comes from relying on the One who never leaves. This perspective also teaches emotional maturity. It reminds you not to hold grudges, not to cling desperately to relationships that have already run their course, and not to force connections that no longer serve your spiritual or emotional well-being. Instead, you learn to appreciate people for the time they were meant to be in your life and release them with respect and gratitude. You stop begging for closure from humans and instead seek closure from Allah, who knows the unseen and understands your heart far better than any person ever could. And when you truly internalize this concept, you approach relationships differently. You become more present, more appreciative, and more intentional. You value people while they are in your life, but avoid making them the center of your universe. You give love without losing yourself. You support others without compromising your own peace. You care deeply, but hold lightly, knowing that everything, except your bond with Allah, is temporary. That awareness keeps your heart balanced, your expectations realistic, and your soul anchored. When people leave, you also learn resilience. You discover that you can survive heartbreak, disappointment, and separation. You learn to rebuild, recenter, and reconnect with your own inner strength. And through this process, you come to realize that your story does not end with someone else walking away. Allah writes your story, and He never removes someone without purpose, nor does He ever leave your heart empty after taking something away. Every departure opens room for a new blessing, a new lesson, or a deeper closeness to Him. Understanding that not everyone is meant to stay forever allows you to embrace change, release pain, and carry your heart with dignity. It frees you from holding on to what Allah Himself is pulling away. And once you accept this reality, you begin to experience life with a calmer, clearer, and more trusting heart, one that relies on Allah more than anything that comes or goes. Focusing on your relationship with Allah rather than people is one of the most liberating and empowering shifts a person can make, because it redirects the heart from something unstable to something eternal. When you invest your energy, emotion, and self-worth in people, you inevitably experience disappointment. Human beings change, forget, get distracted, and sometimes hurt each other unintentionally. Their opinions shift based on mood, circumstance, or personal struggles. But when your heart is anchored to Allah, your stability no longer depends on the unpredictable nature of others. You find a source of peace that does not fluctuate with people's treatment, approval, or absence. This shift begins with a simple question: who am I seeking to please? Many times, we exhaust ourselves trying to earn love, respect, or validation from people who may never truly understand us. We mold ourselves into shapes that don't fit, hoping to be accepted. We hide parts of ourselves out of fear of judgment. We carry emotional burdens that are not ours to bear. But when you place Allah at the center of your life, the need for worldly validation fades. You start living for a higher purpose, not for the fleeting approval of people. You realize that your worth is defined by the One who created you, not by the opinions of those who barely know your heart. When your relationship with Allah becomes your priority, your inner world transforms. You become more mindful, more sincere, more compassionate, and more disciplined. Worship no longer feels like an obligation. It becomes your anchor. Salah becomes the moment your heart resets. Dua becomes the space where you unload your struggles. Quran becomes the voice of reassurance when people go silent. Instead of turning to others when you're hurting, your first instinct becomes turning to Allah, and this shift brings a deep emotional independence. You stop expecting people to heal wounds they didn't cause. You stop searching for peace in places that were never meant to give it. Prioritizing Allah also helps you build healthier relationships with people. When you don't need others to fill your emotional gaps, you interact from a place of confidence, not desperation. You can give love without losing yourself. You can help others without draining your own spirit. You can forgive more easily because your heart is nourished by something greater than human behavior. You no longer cling to people out of fear of loneliness, because the one who is closer than your jugular vein never leaves you. This creates relationships based on sincerity, not dependency. When your heart is centered on Allah, you also gain clarity in decision making. You're no longer guided by pressure, fear, or emotional instability. You choose what brings you closer to Allah, not what brings you temporary comfort. You recognize which relationships uplift your faith and which ones weaken it. You develop boundaries, not out of coldness, but out of wisdom. The more connected you are to Allah, the more He strengthens your intuition. You begin to sense when something is not right, when someone is not good for your heart, or when a path is not aligned with your values. This internal transformation naturally reflects in your actions, your character, and your overall presence. You become more patient because you trust Allah's timing. You become more content because you trust His plan. You become more courageous because you know He is your protector. And you become more resilient because you know He never burdens a soul beyond what it can bear. Focusing on your relationship with Allah is not about withdrawing from people. It is about elevating the foundation from which you engage with them. When Allah becomes your source, people become blessings, not lifelines. Their presence becomes a gift, not a requirement, and their absence becomes manageable, not devastating. This is the kind of peace that only comes when your heart finds its home in the one who never changes. Understanding that your worth comes from Allah alone is one of the most freeing realizations you can ever embrace. So many people spend their lives trying to impress others, trying to fit in, trying to gain approval, or trying to avoid criticism. They shape their identity around how others view them, forgetting that people's opinions are unstable, inconsistent, and influenced by their own flaws and insecurities. When your self-worth is tied to human approval, you will always feel anxious, always fear rejection, and always feel like you are not enough. But when your worth is rooted in Allah, the one who knows your intentions, your struggles, your sincerity, and your heart, you become unshakable. Allah does not judge you by the standards of society, by trends, by beauty, by status, or by material achievements. He judges you by your piety, your humility, your sincerity, and how close your heart is to Him. When you internalize this truth, you stop chasing superficial validation. You stop comparing yourself to others. You stop feeling pressured to meet unrealistic expectations. Instead, you begin to focus on what truly matters: your character, your worship, your values, and your inner peace. This shift brings a level of confidence that no worldly success can provide. You walk through life knowing that you are valued by the one whose love is eternal and unconditional. When you base your worth on Allah, you also become more forgiving of yourself. You recognize that you are human, imperfect, growing, learning, sometimes falling, but always capable of returning to Him. You stop being harsh with yourself for past mistakes because you know Allah is Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving. You stop doubting your abilities because you know Allah is Al-Qawi, the most powerful, and He can strengthen you. You stop feeling small because you know Allah created you with purpose and wisdom. This self-compassion helps you rise after setbacks without the crushing burden of shame or self-loathing. Anchoring your worth to Allah also protects you from the emotional roller coaster of people's opinions. One moment someone may praise you, and the next moment they may criticize you. One moment you may feel accepted, and the next you may feel ignored. If your value depends on this shifting behavior, you will live in constant instability. But when you seek acceptance only from Allah, you remain emotionally centered regardless of how people treat you. Their compliments will not inflate your ego, and their criticism will not destroy your spirit. You become balanced, dignified, and grounded. This understanding also changes the way you interact with others. You no longer allow yourself to be mistreated because you know your worth is far too high for toxic relationships. You no longer beg for love, attention, or loyalty from people who don't value you. You set boundaries not out of pride, but out of respect for the soul Allah entrusted you with. You walk away from anything that harms your peace or your relationship with your Creator. This is not arrogance. It is recognizing that Allah honored you, so you must honor yourself as well. And when you truly believe that your worth comes from Allah, you start living with purpose. You stop wasting time on things that drain your spirit. You invest in actions that bring you closer to Him. Kindness, charity, learning, worship, gratitude. You feel content with what He gives you, instead of constantly comparing yourself to others' blessings. You trust that whatever is written for you will come at the right time, in the right way, through the right doors. This kind of confidence is subtle but powerful. It makes you strong without hardness, humble without insecurity, hopeful without attachment. When you know that Allah values you, no rejection can break you, no failure can define you, and no loss can erase your worth. You become a person whose heart is anchored, peaceful, and luminous, because its worth is tied to the One who created it. Believing that Allah removes something from your life only to replace it with something better is one of the most comforting and empowering truths a believer can hold on to. It teaches you that loss is not the end of your story, nor is it a sign of failure or divine displeasure. Instead, it is part of Allah's perfect wisdom, a redirection toward what will benefit your heart, your future, and your faith. When you internalize this, you stop viewing endings with fear and begin seeing them as transitions designed by the One who knows you better than you know yourself. There are moments when something you wanted slips away, or a plan you were certain about collapses. At that moment, your heart aches and your mind fills with questions. But what you may not see is the harm that Allah shielded you from, the spiritual weakening He prevented, or the better opportunity waiting just beyond the closed door. Often, the things we cling to with desperation are the very things that would have limited our growth. We want them because we see with human eyes. Limited, emotional, and short-sighted. Allah, on the other hand, sees the entire picture. He knows what could break your heart later, what could derail your purpose, or what could distance you from Him. When He removes something, it is not to hurt you, but to protect you in ways you may not yet understand. This belief also nurtures patience. Instead of panicking during difficult moments, your heart stays anchored with hope. You trust that Allah never takes away without giving back, often in ways far greater, more meaningful, and more lasting than what you lost. You begin to see that every delay is preparation, every hardship is refinement, and every loss is purification. The believer who trusts this divine pattern lives with a calmness that others cannot comprehend. While others break under pressure, you stay steady because you know something beautiful is being prepared for you. This trust also keeps your heart free from bitterness. When people leave, you don't sink into resentment or self-blame. You don't cling to relationships that Allah Himself has removed. Instead, you honor the lesson they brought and let them go with grace. You understand that if someone was meant to be part of your journey, Allah would have kept them there. Their departure is a sign that your next chapter requires a different environment, different influences, or a deeper reliance on Allah alone. Furthermore, believing that Allah replaces with better inspires you to keep moving, keep growing, and keep improving yourself. You do not wait passively for blessings to fall into your lap. You prepare yourself for the better that is coming. You refine your character, deepen your faith, strengthen your resilience, and work on your goals. You trust that your effort, combined with Allah's mercy, will create outcomes far beyond your imagination. This proactive mindset transforms loss into motivation rather than despair. As time passes, you begin to see the truth of Allah's promise unfold in your life. You look back at moments that once shattered you and realize they shaped you into someone wiser and stronger. You recall times you cried over something that ended, only to later thank Allah for saving you from it. You see how He replaced heartbreak with healing, confusion with clarity, emptiness with contentment, and loss with blessings you never thought possible. These reflections strengthen your faith and teach you to surrender more willingly to His plan. Living with this belief makes you courageous. You stop fearing change because you know Allah is the one guiding it. You stop fearing rejection because you know He is redirecting you. You stop fearing loss because you know He will replace it with something better. Your heart becomes a place of peace, not because life is perfect, but because you trust the One who is perfect in His wisdom. When you truly believe that Allah never takes without giving, you walk through life with hope, knowing that every closed door is leading you to the one that was always meant for you.